So locally, we never used to have this divisive ways of having tribes and territories. That's new, introduced in 1950s when the governments of Canada began to subdivide the nations in their territories. And my mom's uncle is from here, from the George family. And so we cannot say we're not from here. So my mom's uncle is late Chief Dan George. And so our family connects here. And in my mind, our ways are to always keep connected in our thoughts. So that keeps us with strength and motivation to continue on. And you know the legacy of the George family. Even though we're on an island, I honor my mom's uncle's territory, this Squamish, they call it, and Musqueam, where our families are. My mom's grandmother came from Musqueam Nation, and the first origin of the masks, the sacred masks that my son uses, originally comes from my mom's side. And so the crests I'm wearing is from my great-grandmother's side, from Nitnat. And so all the nations here tie together from our origin times. So along here, where my mom's family used to live before it got developed and settled, was Hoi Hui. It's called Hoi Hui in our language. And this side, mainland dialect, it's called Schoihui in our Halkaminam dialect, which means the mask. So to you, it's Stanley Park. So that's where my family lived at one time. And so the Thomases came from what you call where the spaghetti factory is. That's where the Thomases came from before it got developed. So I'm talking to you about the origin times of the First Nation people. So I honor them, and I honor our ancestors who lived here at one time and moved on to develop our families in other places, defend and develop the territories, especially for, on my son's side, Capilano, which you will know as Capilano. So Chief Capilano was the one that developed a lot of the territories because he defended it when it was being settled. So they went to war at one time. So we honor all of our ancestors at this time. And as you see on the map, you'll see all those territories that originated together, the Coast Salish territory, before it got divided in 1950s. I was 3 years old at that time, but I can remember the turmoil when it started happening. So there was a banishment of big house ceremonies where all the business, it's like going to Toronto Dominion or Bank of Canada or whoever you bank with and locking the doors completely and not allowing you in to do the business. So the business there was done for funerals, marriages, puberty rites. So the puberty rites were done in each area for a special reason. And that was to help you develop your character, your traits, and your identity. So you start at a very young age. And so when you're conceived, those ceremonies started. And the mummy, your mummy, would start her good thinking, which is good thoughts and feelings we call Aichqualawan, and begin to help you, even though, because you are born in the womb, you're born. You're born into the world after 9 months or so. So like this young man, he was born 8 months. he didn't wait. He wanted to be born, so he was born. So that's how that works. So this territory is a very special, very sacred area, Stanley Park. That's where the masks come from. And so in my family, that was the origins of the sacredness. Now to you. Just gotta lead me, likes paper. Me, I like oral history. So here where the kinship ties belonging, you need to feel that you belong somewhere. And my dad had a very special ceremony. We'll touch on it for puberty rites or the rites of passage that you need to experience to feel welcome to the world. So each time our ceremonies began, the passages were completed. My family did the initiation in the ocean. So as soon as you were born, you were taken with 2 hands by the father, brought down to the ocean, and dunked under. That was your baptism. So you're introduced to the water. You're introduced to the elements. So whether it's air, wind, fire, earth, the 4 main things, each has to know you. So the rites of passage were there for you when you're born. The kinship ties each one of my family. My great-grandmother, she lived to 102, and my mom's mom, 102. My great-grandfather to 113. And he lived on Galliano Island. That's where I was born. So our ties are very strong, and they were the leaders. They died as leaders. No one needed to elect them in a voting procedure, which belongs to the government, not us. So it creates a lot of conflict. Even within yourself, who are you? Do you belong? Do you need that status card to tell you who you are? Because my grandmother didn't. She never ever possessed one and didn't want anyone to tell her who she was. So she was First Nation, and her father came from South America, which I just met and heard the history. And so part of my heritage is South American. Her father came from there. And he came here to work in the forts, Fort Langley. So in our language, it's called Qantas. That's where my grandmother was born. So a lot of us were not born in hospitals. My grandmother delivered all of us until she couldn't deliver because her fingers needed to be strong. And there's a very special way to connect you when you're being born into the world of the way my grandmother held the umbilical cord in her fingers and allowed all the good stuff to come forward from the placenta to you before she'd cut it. And she knew the right time and how to do that. So a lot of it is the placenta where you've been developed. So she'd allow that for a certain time to be held in her hands, and she could pass it on to the baby, and then the baby would benefit all the strength and that she thought that you needed to exist in this world. So that's how she did the births into the world. So there's lots there to talk about. We could go all night on it. But that was the part that you needed for belonging. And the potlatching system just touches on a part of it because the initiation into the mask ceremony that my son experienced just lately, we didn't have to do it as a boy, but there was a little part of it when we did it, the first creation of the mask. when I looked at the mask, I saw the boyhood. And then the boyhood mask is used for the puberty rites that we do every fall time and every spring. And when the moon is in a full phase, it takes a few days before it wanes. And so sun dances for the puberty rites. So that's for the females and a few males that want to experience it as boys, changing to probably teens. We practice that ceremony every year. So that's the potlatching system that son gets to experience. And you have to have a very clean life, no addictions. Otherwise, your sacred mask, taking the eyes out of it. So you'll see it here. On my great-grandfather, he had a big house, and all the human figures are the assistants to every ritual he performed in the big house. So that's the banking system, that's the culture, which is slowly eroding, and there's very little of it, the sacredness left. A lot of the people practice it, but it's very corrupt now. It's corrupted by nepotism. As you know, when the voting system came in to elect the chief and council, which was never done before, like I spoke of, my great-grandfather inherited all the qualities from culture to be a leader. You weren't just voted in. Your good friend gets voted in today. And a big family now rules who is the chief. Where before in culture, the culture was taught you who to be. And it reinforced your identity, where you belonged, and all your inheritance. So all your richness, not money, comes from your family. So that's culture, but it's slowly being eroded. Money is one of them that corrupts. And our village was the last village that didn't have to pay. So now every move you make, you'll see that we have to pay for everything. Right in the middle is where my son inherited the mask, which is the merganser. And each culture, it has its own sacredness. There's a place on Salt Spring Island where you go to practice the sacredness. And you do your fasting and your envisioning. Like you do here in this academic setting, you envision, where do I want to go? Which direction do I want to take? What do I want to experience in this academic world? Then you have to learn how to put that together. You have to create a balance so that you know that one isn't injuring the other, that you're blending it in and helping yourself to be even more stronger from what culture leaves you. So those things, it's a beautiful duck who gathers her family and keeps them with her until they can manage to be on their own. So it's a symbol. It symbolizes what you do in your life and all the support you have from your mother. In the Coast Salish ways, we don't throw away our children when they're addicted or they take the wrong path. We don't punish them. We keep on just wishing, dreaming. It's a mother's hope and dreams that her child will do well for themselves. You've left them enough in their teachings to carry them through their life, whatever they want to live. We don't tell them what to do. Ask my son. I never tell him what to do. I just hope that he does it. At some point, he didn't want to. He didn't want to hear me. And so I felt at the time I need to do some culture. So it caused me to introduce him and initiate him into the mask ceremony. So I felt like I didn't know him anymore. So when he came home one day, I looked at him and it spoke to me in my heart, I don't know my son. You can have a son, but it doesn't mean that you know them. You're not the one creating the life. They are creating a life. We can't be telling them what to do. And so they never will want to do what we want them to do. So that's the dreams and hopes that a mother has for her child, that we just want a good life. We didn't plan on any addictions or any strife or any conflict in your life. We hope to be the best support to you as a mother. And we do have our downfalls, especially when it comes to Two-Spirit, where I had to go to my mother and ask her, Mom, what do I do? Could you help me? I've never heard of people speaking about Two-Spirit. And my son, I've just been like a, what do you call it, homophobic person. I was acting like that because I did have my dreams for him. And then I have to recount what I felt and say, this is my blood, my flesh and blood standing here. I need to love him and support him. And all the family agreed. We talked to one another. We need to keep him going. We need to keep him moving and blend the culture in to the way that he lives his life. We can't tell him how to live it. This is the way he wants to live it. But Two-Spirit, you inherit it from your family. You are born from a mother and a father. So when you're born from two, they call it gender today, a mother and a father, a man and a woman. And which strength is going to come above? Which strength did you feed that is going to come up? Maybe it's the female side, maybe it's the male side. We don't know how that works. And we don't profess to know. That's your life, and that's the way you're going to live it. And if you make a wheel and you put yellow, black, red, and white, leave it as colors, never divide it into human beings. Don't say this is the white skin, this is the black skin. That's wrong. There's only one human race, only one. There is no four. Okay, so we have to remember that. It reminded me when I was talking about the colors, I'm actually causing a division when I say, this is the white skin, this is the black skin. There isn't such a thing, because we're creating division already, and we need not do that. So culture has pulled us a long ways. Ask son, there's so much to the puberty rites that you do it for the rest of your life. You practice in it. So everything that you do when you're coming to make your medicines, and we look at it, if you look at the rainbow in Coast Salish cultures means that's going to be my step stool to get to heaven. And Chief Dan George said there's 7 heavens. 7 heavens. We can't even profess to touch on one because we're not practicing spirituality the way they did. So for us to get to even one heaven, we have to work hard on ourselves. So we're not harming any other human beings on earth. We're just loving them. That's the way my dad taught me. Love all human beings. Whatever you're experiencing doesn't mean you punish one and hurt the other. So that's wrong. So he said, you love all human beings. You don't pick them, you love them all. So love is a big thing for my family. And so they continue today. And my niece helps me to help my son. As you see that on the duck, the rainbow is the step stool to heaven. So I like it that I see it downtown and it's on the road. I love it. Because it's like a path to me. That's your heavenly path in a Coast Salish way. So do you have any questions from me?
And that'll be at the end.
Okay.
If there's, that's good. Hi, Chikasia. I thought the best way for me to define my resilience would be to bring in the actual living proof of my resilience to stigma. So the point of this morning, and I'm so happy that, hi, my name's Rocky. My traditional name is Theustin. I'm a Coast Salish from the Penelakut tribes. Thank you all for being here and for honoring my mother and the other Indigenous representatives that are here for the summit. I remember the first time I participated in the summit, I really felt quite alone as a queer Indigenous man, and so it feels wonderful to have more representation here at the summit. Because we are in an era of reconciliation, I've been speaking with the Community-Based Research Center on not so much on research, but on action, and following through with the Canada Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action. There is a section dedicated specifically to health. And so I thought the best way to do this would be to introduce a Rites of Passage ceremony and to work with other organizations in Vancouver to prepare to do this in 2017 at the summit, to acknowledge other Indigenous, queer, two-spirit, gay, bisexual, men who have sex with men, and question in people. So we're going to work on that, and we're going to call it a medicine bundle. And so Indigenous people usually feel like we know what the statistics are going to say. We live out those statistics, and we need actual material preparations and resources. So the best way to do that would be to walk the talk of reconciliation and to bring queer Indigenous people here next year to see what we can actually offer them to improve their quality of life in the Metro Vancouver area. So, Heichka, thank you.
My name is Kevin Barlow. I'm the CEO for the Metro Vancouver Aboriginal Executive Council, but some of you may know me from Grindr. No. I'm just going to briefly say that tomorrow we're going to have a breakout session first thing in the morning, and we're going to kind of walk people through the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations and how to implement those if there's a desire to do so. I'll kind of walk you through a little bit about what has happened here in Canada, from the healing efforts that the federal government has funded to the apology that Prime Minister Harper made, to some of the compensation that went out to residential school survivors, and now to a place of reconciliation. And so it'll be a good opportunity to kind of find out, like, why should we? Why should we try to work with Indigenous people to reconcile? And if you are interested, then we'll tell you how and what we expect and what you might learn from that process. And we're doing it through a two-spirit lens, because both Rocky and I are two-spirited, but also that, you know, within our community, we don't have, as the elder was explaining, we don't have throwaway people. And at one time, two-spirited people were very much a part of the decision-making process, the ceremonies within our communities. And so we need to make sure that these displaced roles that have happened over time are brought back into the center of making decisions, and we're moving forward together. And I think, you know, for myself, I worked in the HIV field for many, many years, almost 2 decades. And And I think a lot of us can share those experiences of, when we first started in this fight, how many people were lost, and how we now have different hope, I guess, with treatments and stuff. But there's still many Aboriginal people who are living with HIV that are not undetectable. They're still, struggling with basic survivals and not experiencing the same kind of health outcomes that other people might enjoy. And so we want to basically be able to talk about that so that the Cbrc and the Gay Men's Health Summit can be more attuned, I guess, to some of those issues. And so hopefully through some of the endorsements here, do I speak to these, or are you supposed to do that?
They will.
Or you guys, right?
Yeah.
So one of those two are going to come up and talk about these particular commitments. But so tomorrow, if you want to come into that session, we'll have much more chance to dialogue. So.
Hi, so my name is Tate, and this is Travis Hoddes, and we represent the board of the Cbrc. And for those of you who don't know, the Cbrc is a community-based research center, and we are the organization that brings you this summit, as well as other programs like the Sex Now survey and the investigators. And at the Cbrc, we think it's really important for us to recognize and celebrate the diversity that exists within our community, but also to recognize that health disparities exist also within the gay community. With that in mind, we want to specifically and intentionally address some of the recommendations and these calls to action as it pertains to the work that we do. So the Cbrc endorses the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Report, and we will institute change in the work that we do in order to address the health and well-being of Indigenous people. Cbrc acknowledges that the current health disparities experienced by Indigenous people in Canada are a direct result of the historic wrongs executed by the government, and most particularly the residential school system. Cbrc recognizes that racism and the lasting influences of colonization infiltrate our society and institutions. This contributes to unequal opportunities and inequitable access to health for Indigenous people.
In addition, the Cbrc is committing to contribute high-quality, respectful, and relevant health data on gay, bisexual, queer, trans, and two-spirit Indigenous men through engagement, collaboration, and advocacy. As Todd mentioned, we have specifically collected data in Sex Now from Indigenous men and hope to do that going forward, but in a way that's engaged with and collaborative with some of the Indigenous two-spirit and gay, bi, and queer men who are at the summit. Cbrc will also work to educate and provide training on Indigenous health, cultural safety, and traditional healing practices for those working in gay men's health. And as Kevin mentioned, there are some sessions, 3 sessions, breakout sessions this afternoon and tomorrow at the summit, some of which specifically use traditional healing approaches, and you're invited to come to these sessions. Cbrc will sit at the Metro Vancouver Aboriginal Council on Health and Wellness Roundtable on a regular basis. And as Rocky mentioned, at this summit, going forward, we commit to returning to address these issues and facilitate discussion on an annual basis at the summit. I think we also want to mention recognizing that everyone here is coming from a very different place, a different organization, and a different role in your own communities. So this is also an opportunity for you to think about how you in your own capacities could commit to addressing some of the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Thank you.
I want to thank you for opening the morning. Florence, it seemed like you maybe wanted to take a question, and I think we could probably take one question if there was one in the audience. Otherwise, Rocky and Kevin will be doing a breakout session tomorrow morning, and I'm hoping that Florence will join us for the coffee break at the very least so that people can have a chat with you. So thank you, the 3 of you.